Hi everybody, it's Nick. My goodness, what's going on? All of these vlogs in all of these days. So I've had some more thoughts, as I often do on menopause and particularly trauma. So I suppose context here is really important, because I'm a soul midwife. I retrained a few years ago. A soul midwife is a non-medical, holistic, spiritual, emotional, therapeutic support, companion, friend for people who are facing end of life. So I work with our local hospice and also in the community with a whole variety of different beautiful souls to help them on their journey. And people often say to me, well, what does that really mean? And I think what it means is that I'm a friend in very difficult and challenging times, and I will sit in that space with people no matter what, and they can talk to me about absolutely anything. There's absolutely no judgment, and they can share all of their fears and anger and hopes and dreams and loves and losses, or whatever it is. They can ask the questions, and I will stay there. I will stay there with them, and I will listen, and I will be there, and I will hold their hand and shine a light during the dark nights. But one of the things that has meant for me that I have become much more intrigued by has been the whole concept of trauma, and as human beings, how trauma manifests in our life. And it's really interesting, because before I became really interested in this, which it's something that I've observed as my role as a soul midwife, the very, I think, tangible role that trauma can play, particularly when we're approaching death, is the role of trauma in menopause. And it made me think about that today. So when my menopause started, it was really confusing. It was really confusing, and it took us a while to realise that it was the menopause. And I was actually treated for quite serious depression for quite a while. At the time, it'd been a bit of a roller coaster. I'd been a bit at 6s and 7s and a bit lost, if I'm honest, for quite a while. So, and I think this background is probably important. So yeah, please bear with me. Came from a big, loving, caring family. We're very working class. We didn't really have any spare money or anything like that. And I remember my dad always used to say to us, the only way out, the only way, to make a difference to the way we were leading our lives was basically education. So education was a really big deal. Not that I was terribly good at school, to be honest. Well, I wasn't bad, but I could have worked a lot harder than I did. Anyway, what that meant is I was very, very driven. I was really, really driven to get to university and to get a good job that paid shitloads of money, because I really fucking disliked not having money. I really disliked looking in the shop windows and never being able to afford anything. And I really fucking disliked the way people treated you when you didn't have any money. I disliked that inequality, and I saw it a lot, and I was not happy, and I wanted to change my life so it wasn't like that. So for many years I was on that trajectory, and I was really blessed. I was blessed, but I worked really fucking hard for a long time, really hard. And I had a really good, successful career, and I made more money than I could have ever dreamt of. I also spent more money than I could have ever dreamt of, to be honest, but there we go. And then one day I fell madly and passionately and wonderfully in love with my husband. And I was in my 30s, and I never thought I wanted kids. But the minute I met him, I realised that I did want kids. And so we embarked on our venture together, and we set up our own business, which was really successful. It was a consultancy, and I thought I'd have kids at the same time, because it's not such a big deal and all of that jazz. And everything was okay for a while. But then something, particularly as a female, something really fundamentally changed in me after giving birth. It wasn't quite so strong after my first son, and maybe that's because he was my first. I had one child, so I had the capacity and the time to give him my love and attention, and at the same time still have some left over for me and my career. But after our second son, things really started to fall apart for me. It was also a really difficult time in the market. So we were running a management consultancy. It was 2008, for those of you that can remember. It was the big financial crash. It was fucking hardcore. It was not easy. And I was no longer working for a really large blue chip consultancy. So, you know, I was running my own with, I don't know, 8 or 9 employees. It was a big responsibility. And I had really quite a traumatic birth with my second son, which I think went completely unnoticed by everybody. I was never really given the space or the time to process that trauma. He's gorgeous. He's just the most beautiful baby. And it wasn't traumatic having him as a baby. It was traumatic in terms of the physical stuff I had to go through, which, don't worry, I'm not going to take you through. But it was, well, they say it was a natural birth. It didn't feel that natural because he was 11 pounds, 3 3/4. He was fucking big. And I remember feeling so ill afterwards. I remember I couldn't hold him just after he was born because my body was in shock, and I was actually vomiting. And then I remember a few hours later I was checking emails, and then I remember a few days later just being, honestly I want to cry thinking about it now, but just being beyond heartbroken because I had to go back to work. Within a few days I had to go back to work, or a couple of weeks or whatever it was. I remember it being really quick, and just there was the physical trauma of the birth, which was never really recognised, and it was a bit skirted over, and my body had been ravaged. And then there was the emotional trauma of then having to leave him. And you wonder why you carry on, don't you? Because I carried on to have a third child, and that's really, I think, when the wheels fell off, and I just got really, really depressed, and I just got really, really lost. And this plan that I'd always had, and this person that I'd always thought I was, just didn't seem to fit me anymore at all. And everything just seemed really overwhelming and confusing. And the reason I'm talking about this is one of the things that I've noticed within the menopause is that I'm revisiting periods of this life. And the menopause kind of opens up different windows into our soul, I think. And for me, it's opening up a whole series of different windows that I don't think I've ever looked through very clearly or with honesty. And I think that it's meant I've either been triggered or upset, and I'm not necessarily knowing why. And the more work I've done on trauma, the more I've understood is that I think we just lock these things away. Don't get me wrong, I don't think I'm particularly special, right? I think I've had a really blessed life, and I want to be really conscious. I don't want to be a victim mode of poor me. That's not what any of this is about. But I think it is really important for us to be curious about what we feel about certain things and how we react, and to ask these questions, because actually I want to do something really positive with it. I want to do something worthwhile with it, and I want to understand us as human beings better, so we can live better lives and not have to go through so much suffering, not have to hit rock bottom before we can start to make changes. And as ever, this is a bit random, but what is occurring to me is one of the things the menopause did, and I'm a bit all over, aren't I? Because I've kind of lost my train of thought of where I was starting there. But one of the things it did is it's opened these windows into things that I'd shut away and almost hadn't allowed myself to recognise for what they were. So in order to heal, you need to feel. And that was one of them. And the reason my menopause was so difficult to put a handle on when I started, years ago when it started, when I was 46, they actually diagnosed me with chronic fatigue syndrome, which just somehow didn't sit with me at all. And luckily I had medical, GP people who knew me really well, so we got to the bottom of it. But the reason was, my father had died. It'd been absolutely fucking horrible. There's a whole different story there, and it was actually his parting gift, was the nature of his death, and the whole experience was what led me to retrain as a soul midwife. And actually we need to do death better. But what it meant was that we all thought I was just really, really depressed. I was just really depressed and I was grieving, and I was depressed and I was grieving, and all of that is perfectly reasonable when you lose somebody you love. But underneath all of that, and I think what probably kicked the menopause off and maybe kicked all of these things out of sync, was this trauma. So there's something really significant here around our emotional and psychological health and how that links to our physical health in the menopause. And I'm not quite sure I've got the answer. I think I just wanted to talk about it today and say there's something in there. Don't worry, I'm going to listen back to this. I've got no idea whether this follows a train or not, but there's definitely something in allowing ourselves to explore and look at those things that upset us, and not to have this narrative that says, oh, you know, pull yourself together, stop feeling sorry for yourself, oh, you know, poor you kind of thing. That's just stuff we go through. It's okay to give yourself permission to validate when you feel shit about stuff, when you feel hurt, when you feel traumatized. It's okay, because once we can do that and get it out there, we can then decide what we want to do with it. So it's a bit on the same theme as yesterday, isn't it? Anyway, thoughts for now. Lots of love.